This thing was not supposed to be here, that much was clear. Jimmy and Karen Peterson had encountered this giant beached object on a long hike. At first, they thought it might have been a whale of some sort, but they were quickly proven incorrect, and after a bit of further inspection, Jimmy actually finds a way into the object. But when he discovered what was inside of it, he realized they should have never interacted with it. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Jimmy had finally made his way into the strange object. It was very dark and looked to be mostly empty, but when he managed to turn on his small flashlight and illuminated the space, he suddenly realized that this was not the case. His wife Karen was still waiting outside, nervous as could be. Every passing minute made her fear grow. She called out his name repeatedly but received no response. Then, a sudden scream from inside the object shook her. She rushed toward Jimmy, hoping she wasn't too late. The unusual object had caught their attention immediately as they approached the water. Even from a distance, it stood out, its size and shape defying logic. As they got closer, they were astounded by how massive it was. It definitely wasn't a boat or anything they'd ever seen. Curiosity drove Jimmy to investigate further, even as unease crept in. Karen was reluctant but followed, ready to retreat at the first sign of danger. When they reached the object, Jimmy's initial guess that it was part of a dead whale quickly proved wrong. Its texture was far too hard and unnatural, and when he knocked on it, the hollow sound baffled him further. Karen believed the hollow sound was due to gas buildup inside a whale and feared it might explode. Jimmy, however, was determined to uncover the truth. He convinced Karen to touch the object, hoping she'd see it wasn't what she thought. Hesitantly, she agreed but remained unconvinced. Jimmy insisted they couldn't just walk away without answers. He worried authorities might cover up the truth, silencing their discovery. Karen suggested they notify someone and move on, but Jimmy couldn't shake his need to investigate further. Karen finally agreed to give him half an hour to explore while she took a break nearby, uneasy but trusting him. Jimmy circled the object, searching for an opening. The mouth was sealed and no doors or holes were visible. Frustrated, he suddenly remembered the climbing picks in his backpack. He ran to retrieve them, eager to use them to create an entry. Back at the object, Jimmy began striking its side with the picks. Pieces chipped away with each hit, scattering around him. Progress was slow but promising. Over the sound of his efforts, Karen's alarmed scream rang out, urging him to stop. She was worried about damaging something unknown and potentially dangerous, or even getting into legal trouble. But Jimmy's determination outweighed her protests. As Karen pleaded, the object finally crumbled under Jimmy's strikes. He reached inside and felt open air, a hollow space. This wasn't a stranded whale. It was undeniably man-made. Yet that revelation only deepened the mystery. Jimmy stood in awe, his curiosity driving him further, while Karen's shouts of caution faded into the background, and he had to do it now. Jimmy widened the hole, determined to crawl through and explore. Karen's frantic shouts to stop grew louder, but Jimmy ignored her. He reassured her he'd only be a minute, though his words did little to ease her worries. She knew there was no stopping him now. Once inside, darkness enveloped him, save for the faint light from the hole he had made. Using the flashlight on his phone, Jimmy illuminated the space. He found himself in a small, sectioned-off room with thin walls. Unlike before, he didn't need to dig further. There were small latches on the walls leading to other sections. Jimmy carefully crawled through each opening, meticulously exploring every area. Jimmy went into section after section, and all were as good as the rest. And so he found himself continuing on with the hope that eventually he would figure it out. There was some writing on the walls sometimes, but it was in a language that he did not understand. He had no idea how long he had spent in the object, where exactly he was in it, or even how he could get out. He knew Karen had to be getting worried at this point, but he was not done exploring. Instead, Jimmy wanted to keep going and find out even more. But then he finally got to a wall that was a bit different than the ones he had seen so far. It seemed sturdier and even had a door built into it instead of a wall. The door was locked, but Jimmy knew that the answers he was looking for had to be behind it. He was not going to let this stop him. Outside of the object, Karen was still nervously waiting for Jimmy to come out of the object again. She took her bag with her and headed into the dense forest. The adventure had begun, but it was going to take a shocking turn. Of course, Mary didn't go in empty-handed. She'd bought everything she could think of that she'd need the day before at the local market. This included a flashlight, a fair length of rope, a small first aid kit, and some food. She didn't expect to have to use any of it, but it was good to have it anyway. Even though it was mid-morning and the sun was out, the woods were fairly dark. The sun couldn't cut through the dense tree coverage. It cast a gloomy feeling into the air and created an almost scary atmosphere. Mary continued on through it all, but was very tense on the inside. She was beginning to doubt if she'd made the right decision to come into the woods. What if there was something dangerous here? A murderer or a bear, or a murderous bear? Maybe there was a legitimate reason that people didn't come in here or told their children to stay away. Mary dismissed these thoughts. She was an adult, a strong and smart woman who had worked her way in the city and had brought herself a lot. She could handle anything this forest could potentially throw at her. She was sure of it. She didn't know just how wrong she was. Mary had been following what appeared to be a narrow path through the trees, and it had been leading her deep into the woods. Now it was starting to loop back toward the bus stop. She had a decision to make. Go back to the bus stop empty-handed or keep going without a trail. Mary decided firmly to stray from the path. She'd be careful, she told herself. She wouldn't do anything dangerous and she'd stay where she could see. That didn't last very long. Soon enough, she had her flashlight out and was struggling to get anywhere, and soon enough, she'd find what she was looking for. It didn't take long for Mary to lose the path, but it didn't matter. Mary could see what appeared to be a clearing up ahead. If she could get to it, she'd be okay. But how come she hadn't seen the clearing sooner? It seemed to appear out of nowhere. She knew she was being silly, but these woods were spooky. As soon as she entered the clearing, she was drawn to something on the ground that clearly stood out from anything else nearby. Amongst all the trees, fallen branches, and mounds of dirt, there was something here that she couldn't quite explain. She had to get a closer look as soon as possible. Even though she had no idea what she was looking at, Mary tried to come to a conclusion as to what it was. It looked like maybe a body. No, bodies that were arranged in a circle. The whole thing was freaking Mary out. Who would put bodies here? Were they bodies? This was beyond bad. Mary wasn't sure what to do now. The best choice would be to call for help, the police even. She tried calling her parents but didn't get any signal. She had no idea where the path was, and she knew if she left now, she probably wouldn't be able to find this clearing again. So what now? With nothing else to do, she picked up a stick and poked one of the bodies. It was soft, squishy even. This was incredibly weird, and Mary was legitimately scared now, but she was still curious. She reached out with a hand to touch the strange body-shaped thing when something happened.